This is a recording of Sympathy for Herod by Mark McBride, Draft 2, 2013. It is registered by Mark McBride with the Writers Guild of America and has been edited for this presentation. Read to you by Andy Gates. Hank's office, morning. Hank Aronson flicked on the lights in his office. The room was well kept, yet relaxing and welcoming, like Hank himself. He turned on his computer and took comfort in the familiar hum, as if he were booting up the day itself. For his own boot-up, Hank preferred the tea in a traditional Japanese teapot. The kitchen had no hot plate, so he had brought one from the lab. It was almost too large for the countertop and probably against company policy, but everyone else would come in and use it for one thing or another, so no one complained. He listened to the almost inaudible hum of its electric current. On the shelves above the kettle stood a modest trophy display of framed pictures and memorabilia, including a photo of Hank in front of Notre Dame as a tourist in winter, a signed baseball in a small acrylic box, a photo of Hank with other buddies on a boat, a guitar pick mounted in a small frame, and an old blurry photo of a distant stage mounted with an equally old concert ticket stub. The kettle began to whistle. Which would it be today? Chamomile or just regular green tea? The lab. Isaac and Roy stood around James, who filled a small test tube. James was 32 and never wore his lab coat. Neither did Isaac, nor Roy for that matter, but no one ever gave Isaac and Roy a hard time about it. He swished around the test tube as all three stared. It changed color. "No way in hell," Roy said. Amy Redmond's cube. Amy Redmond tapped a pile of papers into perfect alignment. Then she did it again, and again. She checked once more that everything was ordered correctly, then she tapped the papers one last time, clipped them, and dropped them into a manila envelope. The others began to fill the office. Morning chatter was starting. Hank's office. Hank had hung up his jacket and held his phone to his ear with his shoulder while he rolled up his sleeves 3/4 of the way. Okay, nothing is that bad. We were ready for this. Well, I was ready for this. Observation room. The observation room was a fair-sized room with a flight control tower's worth of equipment and a window that stretched the length of a wall and looked into a strange white room. James and Roy stood around Isaac, who punched something up on a computer. "That's all we can do right now," Isaac said. James swore once under his breath. On the other side of the window, the room was white and covered in plastic. The light seemed to emit from nowhere in particular, like a greenhouse underground. In the room sat a thin, almost otherworldly-looking young woman, calmly reading a thin paperback. Hank's office. Hank closed the door behind him and gestured for Amy Redmond to sit. "I'm sorry to keep you waiting," Hank said. "There was a fire to put out in purchasing. Luckily, it wasn't an actual fire this time. Would you like some chamomile tea?" Amy sat rigid in her chair. "Sure," she answered tersely. "Would you like some honey for your tea? I don't have any milk." No, I'm fine, thanks." Hank took a seat and turned his attention squarely to the stone-faced woman in front of him. "Well, Amy, it's nice to finally meet you in person. Now, what can I do for you?" She shifted forward and somehow made herself more stiff than before. "I was supposed to set up an escrow account to buy out this lab that we were going to use to kick off a botanical genetics division. It's a counterbid to beat out this Italian firm, but the lab is an Argentine company, but I didn't know that the escrow broker was in Uruguay, and they're a private company with these weird deadlines and holding periods, and accounting is saying that it's purchasing, so they won't help me." Hank held up both hands as if to stop a train. "Amy, it's fine. I can take care of this. Let me see what you've got there." He motioned and she gave him the manila folder. He sifted through the papers, reading each document quickly. Amy quelled the unbearable silence by analyzing Hank's trophy shelf. Hank sighed and pulled out a single sheet. Well, first off, you put the wrong date on here. What's today? Amy furrowed her brow and leaned over his desk. I'm sure I put the right date. I know today is the 12th. So today's the 7th. Hank looked at her with a comforting wink and grin as he pulled out a fresh copy of the form from a tray on his desk. But a little more seriously, are you paying for the company as a company or its assets? Amy remained leaning in. That's just it. We're buying the instruments and facilities. No one here has any use for it until they give us the research. Hank thought for a moment. Okay, we can't say that. If we ask for equipment before personnel, we'll get a please resubmit. That's a rejection without the commitment of the red stamp. If whoever approves this doesn't talk to pharmacology, you could say that they're trying to turn their greenhouse to hydroponic. Hank thought again. I like it. He turned to his monitor and began typing in items from Amy's paperwork. Amy sat back and interlaced her fingers hard around her knuckles. You're the head of logistics. Isn't it your job to be a hawk about this stuff? My job, Hank said without stopping, is to make sure that you have what you need to do your job. You need this lab to do your job. The people on the other side of this form want us to keep doing our jobs. Ergo, they want you to have these Argentines equipment, even if they don't know that it isn't for aspirin and grow lights. Amy nodded slightly and stood. Hank followed her out of his office and put the manila folder on Jason Billings' desk. Jason will have everything in the system by the end of the day. I'll have the processing come to me to make things happen faster. Thanks, Mr. Aronson, said Amy. You're really saving my life here. And don't worry about this, said Hank. We've saved many projects like this before. He nodded and Amy walked away, stiff as ever. Hank took a post-it note from Jason's desk and scribbled something. He stuck the note on the folder and returned to his office.